Welcome, everybody, to the Africa Summits, part of the Holland IQ Global Summit Series of 2022. And I am really lucky to be joined for this interview by Shika Goyal of Imaginable Futures. Hello, Shika.
Hi, Lucy.
Great to be here. I'm Lucy Blakemore. I'm the Vice President of Global Insights for Holland IQ. And what I think we're going to hear from Shika today will be actually pulling together quite a few threads of things that we're hearing from a lot of the other speakers across the tracks for the Africa Summit. So I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm actually going to spend very little time introducing Shika. She is the venture partner at Imaginable Futures. And if you haven't heard of Imaginable Futures, they're an investment firm that are really, really focused on impact, which of course is the thread that's going throughout these summits, not just Africa. And let me not explain it anymore. I will hand over to you, Shika, to give a little background on what Imaginable Futures are and the kind of things that you're working on.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about our work. And I can't wait to see the other interviews and chats, not only from Africa, but around the globe and learn. So thank you very much again for having me.
Our pleasure.
So I work in an organization, as Lucy said, called Imaginable Futures. We are a part of the Omidyar network, which was founded by Pam and Pierre Omidyar. Pierre is the founder of eBay. And over the last 10 years, Omidyar Network almost, I would like to say, coined the word impact investing together with others like Rockefeller Foundation. And over the last 10 years, we've learned a lot. We were previously the education team of Omidyar Network. Last 2 years, we spun out as Imaginable Futures, still funded by Pam and Pierre Omidyar. And at Imaginable Futures, we believe that learning is key to well-being and equitable and healthy societies. We are a global philanthropic investment firm, and as Lucy was mentioning, we are unabashedly impact first, which means that we prioritize impact over return. We have a very interesting model, which is as a hybrid funder, we fund both for-profit and non-profit, and we have the flexibility to move quickly and redirect as we support transformational ideas, people, and we are very focused on partnerships in the local, national, and global context. As Lucy was also mentioning, today we will talk about Africa, but we also work in the United States and also in Brazil. And as I mentioned, our thesis is on investing in people and ideas that unlock human potential, especially through holistic learning. So that's kind of the background of who we are and how we work.
Wonderful. So let's go, let's focus in a little bit more. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the strategy that you're taking and then the kind of work that's leading you into at the moment.
Absolutely. So just as I mentioned, we've worked on the continent in Africa for about 12 years now. And as we spun out as Imaginable Futures out of Omidyar Network, we paused and decided to relook at our work and what's really working and what's not. And as we did that, one of the things that we all know as well, but that caught our attention and what we were hearing from people is the growing population, sub-Saharan Africa's growing population, especially for young people. So there are about 20 million young people who are ready for work every year from the continent. And by 2035, the continent will contribute more people to the workforce annually than the rest of the world combined. So all these things, plus knowing that young people are not only Africa's future, but the future of the world. And they are our greatest potential to bring about any change. And for this to happen, they absolutely need the opportunities to develop holistically as human beings and as leaders, and to be able to bring their ideas and passions to bear to transform the continent and the world. Mm-hmm. Yet, given our work in Africa, we know that the promise of education sometimes fails too many young people. It fails to set them up for success many times. And about, I don't want to go into the stats that much, but about 87% of children in sub-Saharan Africa lack foundational literacy skills at the age of 10. And many struggle to secure dignified work. That word dignified, which we hear too often from young people, to secure dignified work even after many years of schooling. All of this exacerbated by the pandemic, and also more so for girls, especially after COVID, who probably many of them are not going back into education or employment. In South Africa itself, it was reported that about 300,000 learners are missing from public schools after they reopened, majority of whom are girls. So that's kind of the context that we work in. And with all of this in mind, as we embarked on a new strategy, we decided to take a systems lens really at this thing and ask young people what really enables or inhibits you to lead a meaningful and dignified life. So that kind of what became the start of our strategy process. I'm happy to go into detail, but yeah.
Yeah, I think just as you mentioned systems lens, and I'm recalling some of our conversations about this, I would love to just go down one more level into what that meant when you're posing that question, and it is a little bit different from some of the other questions I think people are posing. Like, what is it that enables you to live a dignified life? I mean, where did that question come from, and what did you learn in some of that process?
No, absolutely. And again, like I said, a lot of people come in. I'll be very honest. A lot of people who are venture capitalists, which we are as well. That's kind of our background. We are shifting more towards a systems lens of looking at things holistically, not from a venture lens. And of course, our hybrid and flexible structure affords us this luxury. A lot of people come and tell us, oh, it sounds a bit fluffy. Like, what does it really mean in practice? The reason we started by asking this question was when we were funding just one portfolio company at a time. Of course, it has impact from that portfolio company perspective. But if we look at Africa, if we look at a country, if we look at a region, if we look at a community, what kind of impact does it make from that lens? And many times it is not just one company that can make that difference, but it is like a group of things that need to happen in that community, in that region, in that country to really make a difference. So really wanted to take a more holistic or a systems lens to it. Doesn't mean that we don't fund in organizations. We still absolutely do, but just look at it slightly differently. So that's the reason we really wanted to get into the details of what is enabling or inhibiting youth to lead a meaningful and dignified life as they define meaningful and dignified. It is not something that we wanted to define for them. So there were three things that stood out pretty clearly for us. One was this demand from youth on multiple pathways to learn and earn. Now, we kept hearing, that there is no one size that fits all, which is kind of has been the approach to learning and growing. Young people were telling us that this one system of schooling, like going from primary, then to secondary, then to university, doesn't really work for me. So how do we cater to the diverse needs and circumstances of young people and actually meet them where they are? And for that, we need a system where there are multiple and adaptable opportunities to learn and grow, both within the formal system and also outside of it. So what that has meant is, just to bring it to life, we have made investments in models like Andela that trains youth in software development skills and then helps them get jobs both from within and outside of the continent. Our partner, Africa Leadership Group, is on this mission to develop 3 million ethical and entrepreneurial leaders by 2035. And they hold young people in their programs from pre-university, which is the Africa Leadership Academy, to university, which is the Africa Leadership University, to career accelerators, which are short courses with ALX, to a network and peer group of like-minded leaders in their program called The Room. So like different opportunities for young people and really meeting them where they are. So that's one aspect of our strategy. The second one is around role models and mentors and how they can shape a young person's life trajectory. A constant question that we heard from youth was, what can someone like me do? I grew up in this setting. I come from this background. I'm from this religion. What are my options? What has someone who's come from my circumstances done? So this aspect of role modeling and mentorship really resonates. And it is a strong tool that is now being used by various youth development programs, opportunities, organizations to demonstrate to young people in a language that they can really understand and that they can see the possible pathways to, again, live dignified lives. We've seen various models of this mentor-mentee relationship at an individual level and also at an organization by organization level across communities and across regions. The other thing was that this mentor-mentee model within community, it not only fosters this, what can someone like me do, but it also reinforces this element of giving back, staying connected, and almost like feeling useful and from an individual perspective. So one of our partner, Maharishi University in South Africa, they have an undergraduate and graduate program for young people. And the way their enrollment work is current students refer new students from their communities, majority of whom are from townships. So that's a key way, again, of what can someone like me do and becoming role models. Another of our partners, Emerging Public Leaders, it recruits promising future leaders from communities and then trains and places them into meaningful civil service positions. Again, I come from this community, but I can achieve these positions. And then, of course, become role models and mentors, and also be a spokesperson for their own communities. So that's the second piece of what can someone like me do.
Yeah.
And then the third piece of our work is social capital. One of the key things I, again, here was, it's not, we kept hearing, it's not what you know, but who you know. Who you know is just as important or more as what you know. If I want to get a job at Safaricom, I must know someone at Safaricom, not to pick on Safaricom, but just some of the things that we were hearing. And it points to a larger system patterns that education alone is no longer a passport to stable and secure employment. And of course, there is enough empirical evidence as well that shows social capital increases a person's likelihood to get a job by almost 6 times. So how can we democratize access to some of these networks? And one lesson we've seen and what we've realized is that networks has to be embedded in all aspects of their work, of our work. I mean, and their scope remains pretty wide in not only the types of support you provide to young people inside these networks, be it, I don't know, job matching, seed funding, training, alumni access, etc., but also how multifaceted these structures can be, right, from embedded into existing programs to absolutely dedicated programs. So one of our partners, Lato in South Africa, it is a network for young people in townships to identify work and volunteering opportunities. Now, we know that having a work experience is a big thing. It's almost like a prerequisite to get work. So what Zlato does is it identifies work and volunteering opportunities in communities as a way to earn and get this work experience. They've partnered with some of the leading organizations to design very bite-sized lessons and work samples. And then once young people can go through this training, get work opportunities and work experience opportunities in communities, and then they are provided with financial rewards for completion. It's a very interesting model that uses blockchain as a backbone to do all of this. So yeah, so those are some of the things we've been looking at, and that's just a few highlights from our strategy.
Yeah, there's so many particularly striking things about what you've just talked through. I think one of the things that stands out to me is networks and ecosystems. And the other thing is it's almost surpassing, there are sometimes cliches with Africa that, you can leapfrog certain things, like mobile was a big story in Africa for, leapfrogging certain technology things that other countries had gone through. But also you're hearing backlash against this in that, well, actually, it still doesn't mean that internet access is any better widespread and so on. So I wonder if, particularly, I guess the first point, the networking and the ecosystem side of things, I mean, it's incredibly complex to understand that, to communicate it, to make a clear story of it, when I guess there's pressure to measure and show and tell a clearer story. So are there any, I guess, ways and strategies that you navigate that immense complexity of not just a country ecosystem, but many, many countries within an ecosystem?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a great question, Lucy. Something that we've struggled with as well. We've learned along our journey, not to say we've learned everything, we're still evolving, and have shifted. And some of the things I would highlight, again, probably I would highlight three things here. One thing is we focus very, very much on inclusive and equitable programs. In fact, internally, we have a term called JEDI, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And if you look at our website and if you speak to anybody at Imaginable Futures, it will absolutely come out. And we have principles of what do we mean by JEDI, how do we work. It's definitely affected the way we not only invite partners, do diligence, but also how we partner with organizations. So if we think about inclusive and equitable programs, we all know that certain groups of young people, be it from a particular region, be it from a particular country, be it from a particular gender, are left behind and are more impacted by circumstances or by crisis. And for us, what we are starting to focus on more in our work in Africa is young women in many parts of Africa are facing what we call a triple burden as they struggle to balance paid employment, unpaid family care, and also maintaining social and community networks. And if we think about rural Africa, they face the additional triple burden of being young, female, rural. Now, these burdens prevent active inclusion of women in the education and economic productivity. And one of the things we have heard and realized that childcare is a binding constraint. It restricts decision of whether to work and or study, what type of work, which members of the household work. So it has a huge bearing, especially on women. And lack of childcare options often keeps women out of education and workforce, or even from re-entering the workforce after childbirth. So this access to trusted childcare really gives women viable opportunities to continue their education or employment opportunities, and also to grow as a parent. So what we do, besides the youth development work that I talked about, is support childcare infrastructure and early childhood innovations and research. And it has to be focused on, aligned with our values, and also address barriers which we know are around access, around affordability, and quality. So one of our partners, Smart Start, they have a very interesting model where they run community-based early learning centers in South Africa. And these centers not only provide quality and trusted childcare for families, but it also employs young people from those communities to run them. So it's both education and employment. Similarly, another partner, Lively Minds, run programs in rural Ghana where they train young mothers in communities to go and run early learning classes in local schools. So so that's one of the key things that we've started to focus on. I think the other thing here, again, with the JEDI theme, is around supporting local talent. Now, as we have reflected on our journey so far, we've realized, I think I'm being very open and transparent here, is that we have supported founders and entrepreneurs who are many times not from Africa. Perhaps we align with them because they speak like us, they present like us, they use terms like us. And many times in these organizations, the decisions are made outside of the continent by people outside of the context. So what we've started to do is we are being very intentional about local organizations and talent. And what does it mean in practice? So it's not that we will not fund anybody from outside the continent who lives on the continent and works there, but it's a few different themes. And again, we are learning and evolving. So if there are feedback, questions, would love to engage more. Firstly, we look at the leadership team. So what is the composition of African representation on the leadership team itself? So that's the first piece. The second component is the location. Where is the organization actually located? And what is the level of geographic proximity to the markets that they want to serve, or the communities that they want to serve? The third one is on the composition of decision-making of the board, specifically the African representation of the board. The fourth one is around decision-making and decision. So who makes these decisions? What is the decision-making model of the organization? Specifically, what decision-making authority do local teams have? And this is especially applicable to many of the international organizations that have local teams within Africa.
Mm.
I think the last piece is the level of engagement with the markets, with the communities. Now, there is a difference between engaging with markets and communities or just seeking input. So in other words, how are the local communities, the constituents, the markets, how are they being consulted? And how much of an ownership do they feel of the product or service that is being provided to them? So in this vein, we have constituted a youth advisory board where we engage with young people and seek their input on our work, our strategy, in a way that where we can form some trusted relationships with them as well. Yeah, so that's kind of the second piece that we are really focused on.
Yeah, I was quite fascinated by that when we spoke earlier about that kind of looking at how embedded, even from the point of research and the words that are used around research, even concepts that make perfect sense to people who've been studying Western literature for hundreds of years, but have no equivalent meaning in the region. And that was really interesting. And I wonder if you're seeing shifts if you're finding more examples of these genuinely, authentically, locally conceptualized and supported and engaged organizations, or if that's still as much as a struggle as it ever was.
Yeah, no, great question. And I think we are seeing more movement around it. We are seeing more and more ecosystem players talking about it. So there's much more talk about it than ever before, which is great. And again, I think from a context perspective, we do know that a lot of philanthropic money, impact money in Africa comes from outside of the continent. That is just the reality as it stands today. Hopefully it won't be the reality. It won't be this in the future, but that is the reality of it today. So we are seeing some movement amongst the funders, among other ecosystem players, starting to talk about what does it mean to be local? How do we, lead with local context and solutions? How do we support local talent? So as an example of this, you talked about research, and as an example of this, like just to give you a context on research, only 3% of the world research output is actually produced in Africa. And 80% of Africa education research that is being locally led is underfunded. So that's the reality today. So but as I said, there has been some shifts. So there is a recognition from many players that to tackle the most complex educational issues, we have to advance how we identify, support, and engage locally led research. That is recognized more and more. So together with the Kidna Giving, Bill Melinda Gates, and Porticus, we are bringing together a community of African researchers to really understand what will it take to elevate it. What are the gaps and challenges that African researchers face today? And what might be some of the opportunities where we can all work together? Again, realizing that this is more, I've taken the name of funders, but what we really want to do is for the funders to be outside of it and really form a community of practice amongst the researchers themselves. And some of the conversations have highlighted the need, of course, for flexible and core funding, which still remains a huge challenge for many organizations. It's very programmatic. There is no funding to grow as an organization, which remains very, very tiny in the broad scheme of things. Incentivizing and mentoring of young researchers, again, going back to the point of role modeling and mentoring. It's then strengthening linkages between evidence, policy, and practice. And then absolutely launching more gender-sensitive programs, approaches, and models to encourage female participation. Just to put a pin in ground, we've also released a report on this first meeting this week, which you can find on our website as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we can hopefully share that with people next week as well in the virtual platform. I have two more things before we wrap that I'd love to hear back from you from. We've touched here and there, and when you were talking about the work of Imaginable Futures, you've mentioned technologies. You've mentioned things like blockchain, and it's appeared here and there in what we've been speaking about. What role does technology play in some of the areas that you're looking at, and where do you see it helping? what you're funding, and where do you see it still challenging what you're doing?
No, absolutely. Great question. One of the things, again, so we had a big EdTech strategy, like we called the strategy EdTech. And the few things we've realized that EdTech as a strategy, if we think about EdTech as a thing in itself, we will be leaving behind many students, many families, many communities where data is still an issue because of the cost, because of infrastructure, and for many other reasons. EdTech or technology has to be seen as a tool. It is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. So we absolutely use technology. We are not averse to it. That's not the point of shifting it. But as I said, we are seeing it more as a tool in our toolbox to achieve the means, to achieve the end of reaching more young people, of reaching more families, of reaching more communities. So we have Slato use blockchain. We have ALX use short-term courses, both online and in person. And almost all our programs have some aspect of technology included in it, where it makes sense. But there are programs that are also delivered just in person, which are brick and mortar. So it's really going back to that point of meeting young people, families, and communities where they are, using technology where it absolutely makes sense. And technology has a huge role to play, be it for scale, be it for movement building. We absolutely are not ignoring it. But as I said, it's a part of, it's a tool in our toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and so let's kind of finish looking into the future then. I mean, you've painted a really comprehensive picture and taken us quite deep and come out again as to where Imaginable Futures is sitting at the moment and what you're focusing on. What do the next 2 to 5 years hold as far as you're concerned?
So we like to call ourselves an learning and evolving organization, which is absolutely. I think we chose those words very deliberately because we truly believe in that. So the lessons, even from the youth work of what works and what doesn't, what kind of words resonate or not, we've done that in the last year. Our strategy has only been a year and a half old. So I think in the next 2 to 5 years, what we really want to focus on are these 3 areas of multiple pathways to learn and earn around role modeling and mentoring, around democratizing access to networks, plus with a focus on gender for sure. And within this, support organizations, individuals, collaboratives that will really make a difference. We have, again, and go with our hybrid model and really make use of it in terms of for-profit where it makes sense and non-profit where that is much needed. So next 2 to 5 years are really building on this strategy and continue to evolve from the things we learn from the ecosystem.
Yeah. Wonderful. And I guess maybe a slightly mean question to finish on, but if you were to advise people one or two things to internalize about this wonderful region and what they need to understand about working in and with Africa, what would you say?
A lot of times in Western media, we paint this picture of Africa of, I don't know, poverty, broken classrooms. That's not the reality. And I mean, there are some aspects of it, but there are some that those aspects are present in many other contexts as well. So, and at the same time, there is abundance of many things, of many resources, including human capital. So really try and focus on those bright spots, on those shining lights, which are absolutely present on the continent, and support those. The children, the young people, the families, communities have immense talent, immense willingness to grow and contribute. And I don't think they've been given enough credit. And it's on us to really recognize it. And start trusting and shifting more power there.
That's a wonderful note to end on. And I think it's also a wonderful way to reference many of the people that we're hearing from throughout the Africa Summit, we're hearing so many, as you say, shining lights and examples of what's being done really well and really deeply within communities and the social ecosystem. So thank you for wrapping that up so nicely. And thank you for taking the time to walk us through some of the areas that you're looking at. It's been incredibly informative, and really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. Again, thanks for having me. And as I said, if I would love to continue the conversation with people might be seeing this or listening to this. If you have any questions, comments, please keep them coming.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure people know how to find you and find out more about Imaginable Futures as well.
Thanks, Lizzie.
All right. Thank you, Shika.